Daniel Alfredsson has finally been inducted into the Pro Hockey Hall of Fame. And this weekend was a big emotional one for the Ottawa Senators. Ross Levitan of Locked On Senators is here to talk about that and all things Ottawa Senators next on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On NHL podcast. Gil Martin, so glad you could join us today, and thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. It is my pleasure to welcome back a familiar face to Locked On NHL viewers and listeners, Ross Levitan, the co-host of Sens Central, Locked On Senators. And Ross, an emotional weekend here in Ottawa as Daniel Alfredsson finally getting his due and being inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. What does this weekend mean for the Senators fans and for Alfredsson?
Oh, for the fans, it's their first real Hall of Famer, right? Last year, Marian Hossa was the first Senators draft pick, but of course, everyone remembers him with the Chicago Blackhawks. Dominic Hasek had a cup of coffee, but Daniel Alfredsson played 17 seasons for the Ottawa Senators. If you want any sort of reminder of what Daniel Alfredsson means to Ottawa, go check out some highlights from the 2012 NHL All-Star Game. It was his second last season in Ottawa, and it was a complete love-in with Alfie. The game itself, the festivities beforehand, and he is Ottawa. So it's great to see because there were a few years where he was a bit estranged. The way that he left wasn't ideal. He got into a spat with the ownership, and it really kind of cost the owner's last goodwill with the fan base. So everyone kind of took Alfie's side in that, and now the fences are mended. He kind of came out for training camp for a little bit, and then at the home opener, he dropped the ceremonial puck, and it was really like an official welcome back into being like alongside all the other Senators alumni. So it's going to be a super fun event, and as you said, finally, right? It's been 4 years that he was passed over, and it's awesome he gets to go in with the View countrymen, because I think when people, the haters, let's just call them Leaf fans, because we know that Alfredsson certainly didn't endear himself to people in Toronto, whether it was fake stick tossing after Sundin had been fined about a week earlier for throwing his stick into the stands. Alfredsson breaks his stick and like fake throws it. So he did that. There was a hit from 3/4 from behind, we'll call from the side against Darcy Tucker in the 2002 playoffs there. He makes the hit. Tucker's lying on his back, and then Alfredsson goes in and scores the game-winning goal to win that one. So certainly Leaf fans, a lot of people are saying like, oh, no Stanley Cup. Like, does he deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? And I think going in with Daniel and Henrik Sedin is just the cherry on top, because those guys all represented Sweden together. They won a gold medal together. Daniel Alfredsson was the top scorer on Team Sweden at that Olympics. He played in 5 different Olympics as well. Every single Olympics that NHLers went to, from Nagano all the way through till Sochi, he was a part of that team. So I think internationally his resume did a lot of the work, along with 400 goals, 1,100 points, playing as long as he did. He was the first European captain to lead his team to a Stanley Cup final, which I thought was a pretty cool stat. And then it happened quite a bit after, when Lidstrom did it with the Red Wings next, and then Chara ultimately won the Stanley Cup as the first European captain in 2011. So he was a pioneer of sorts. Of course, there were Swedes before him, and real good ones at that, but he certainly was, to us, a generational talent.
And it almost became a crusade for Senators fans to get this long overdue honor across the finish line.
Yeah, if you look back at every important moment in Sens history, Daniel Alfredsson's front and center. Whether it was the unlikely run to make the playoffs for the first time, whether it was his overtime goal that sent them to the Stanley Cup final for the first time in franchise history, he was always there for the biggest moments. And what we loved about him too, it's like, he's the type of guy where, yeah, the shot was unbelievable, hit 40 goals multiple times in his career, hit 100 points multiple times in his career, but he played like a fourth line grinder. Like, he played like every shift was his last. It was the intensity. It was the leadership that he showed on the ice. It was really beyond just the goals and assists. And that's what he brought to the game. He really kind of set the bar for everyone else to try to exceed what he has. Like, he's one of those guys you hear sometimes they come in once in a blue moon where anything he does, he's unbelievable at. Like, a fun story that I believe it was, I'm forgetting who told us the story. It was one of his former teammates joined us on Locked On Sens. We always ask whenever someone played with Alfie, we need a story. Like, this guy's a legend. And every year they do a ping pong tournament in the locker room. And Alfie would enter two teams, one left-handed and one right-handed, and the final would be Alfredsson against Alfredsson in the final. He's a scratch golfer. Like, just whatever this guy did, he was always elite at it and one of the best. So for him to get this honor, it really does kind of put a bow on his career. And he was the first number to be retired in Ottawa. All respect to Frank Finnegan. They retired a number right when they came back to pay homage to like
Right.
the 1910 Senators. But of course, he's just Mr. Senator. And I couldn't be more happy for him and his family. And I really think this is kind of his entrance back into the public eye a little bit more. Like I said, he's been hanging around the team a little bit more. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him in management in the next few years.
Well, that would certainly be a great addition for the Sens. How important was it for the Senators to end the losing streak and beat Philadelphia Saturday?
Oh, so important. Like, they had lost 7 in a row, and they got the loser point against New Jersey. You're like, okay, sure. But when you have a player and like Daniel Alfredsson, he left and went to Detroit for his final year. I don't think it's quite the same, whether it's magnitude or situation with Claude Giroux, but that was his first time back in Philly as a member of the opposition. So certainly there was some money on the board. Guys wanted to get that for him. And what does he do? Contributes 3 assists himself. He looked unbelievable. He's over a point per game player this year. So I think to do it in Philly was super important. And let's hope this gets some rolling. I know our 2 squads are playing on Monday night, where there should be a little bit extra juice there too for the Senators, where they're starting the game. You asked me why. It's like 5:30 starting on a Monday, no holiday. Well, they want everyone to stay in their seats and watch Alfredsson's Hall of Fame induction afterwards. So it'll be a special night, even though Alfredsson will be in Toronto, not at the game. I think it'll still be cool that they're putting on a bit of a show for that.
How concerned are you about the goaltending and the defense for this team right now?
Yeah, more so the defense. Like, Cam Talbot just got back from injury. He was awesome against Philly, but he's still getting his feet wet. Wasn't himself in his first start, but I thought he played better. Forsberg, I really like what he brings to the table. He probably would like to have a few back in his last outing, but all in all, this decor, we knew coming into the season, that's where the weakness was. And now they've added injury to insult. Usually it's the other way around, but they were already being insulted, and now they have to deal with not only Artem Zub, who might be one of the more underrated defensive defensemen in the NHL, but Thomas Chabot. Their horseback there is 3rd in the National Hockey League in average time on ice, suffered a concussion on that game on Saturday. Kind of a questionable hit. I don't think suspension worthy, but probably should have been a 2-minute boarding, but he's going to be out for at least a week. So right now, you've got a top pair of Travis Hamonic, who they acquired for a 3rd-round pick, and even at that price, people thought they overpaid last year at the deadline. And then Jake Sanderson, who's played all of 13 NHL games. However, that kid is wise beyond his years. He looks unreal, but it's going to be a lot to ask for him to be first power play unit, kill penalties. Like, he's 20 years old, so we'll see how he can handle it. But I think that beyond that, there's certainly going to be lacking a bit of depth, at least until Thomas Chabot comes back. Hell, even if both those guys are healthy, I still want them to add another one. So it's going to be by committee for sure. And hopefully, guys, like, if people are listening to this and they're looking for a fantasy pickup for the week, maybe they're low on defensemen, Eric Branstrom's going to get a big opportunity here to take some of those offensive minutes, whether it's a second power play unit. Hey, he might even be put up there on the top unit so that Sanderson can focus more 5-on-5. But I think he's a guy to watch for over the next little while.
All right, some free fantasy advice from Ross Levitan. Ross, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, well, first things first, you can always find Mike DiStefano and I every Wednesday on Locked On NHL. And then Pilsy and I do the Locked On Senators Monday through Friday. Lots of great guests coming up. And we're really, really excited because Mark Mathot, former Sens defenseman, he played I believe 620 NHL games, was partnered with Erik Karlsson for a long time. He's joining us every week now. So it's an awesome addition to the team. So you can come get a dose of meth into your weekend, as we've been having him on every Friday. So we're going to do Alfie stories with him this week. And no, it's all good at Sens Central on Twitter. And then obviously helps out on the YouTube as well. So lots going on for a team that hasn't really been able to string it together here early on in the season. But it's the next couple weeks, let's say, is going to be crucial, because you can't make the playoffs this early. But when you lose 7 in a row, you can certainly put yourselves behind the 8 ball. And that's what the Senators have done. And now they got to crawl out of it in a tough division and an even better conference. Like, you've probably seen this as well. How many times has the West beaten the East this year? It feels like every time there's an East versus West game, the East team comes out on top. Like, the points for the West, nobody's even close. Like, you're either like a second wildcard team in the West, or you're in 10th, 12th place in the East. It's crazy.
It is unbelievable, no question about it. But we'll see if that trend holds up over the course of 82 games. Ross, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. Always my pleasure.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your #1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, we've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those on BetOnline as well. We are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. NHL now in full swing. World Cup soccer just around the corner. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.